My parents always said we couldn't afford college. Turns out they paid for my brothers in full. I graduated with $80,000 in student debt because my parents said they couldn't afford to help me. Then I found out they paid every cent of my brother's tuition. The conversation happened on a Tuesday evening, my junior year of high school. Mom and Dad called me into the living room, their faces arranged in that particular expression of parental concern I'd come to recognize. The coffee table between us held brochures from state schools, a calculator, and a yellow legal pad covered in my father's meticulous handwriting. Numbers, arrows, and circles, a financial roadmap that would determine my future. Ryan, my father began, clearing his throat. We need to talk about college. He adjusted his glasses, the way he always did when delivering difficult news. Your mother and I have gone over the numbers every way possible, and I'm afraid we just can't contribute to your tuition. My mother nodded, her eyes not quite meeting mine. The mortgage, your father's medical bills from last year, our retirement that we've fallen behind on, we're just stretched too thin. I remember nodding, feeling a weight settle into my chest but pushing it aside. This wasn't surprising news. Money had always been tight in our household. Every request throughout my childhood had been met with careful consideration of the budget, explanations of financial priorities, the importance of saving. I'd grown up hearing about the precarious balance of middle-class living. We're so proud of your scholarships, Mom added quickly. And there are loans, of course. We'll help you with the paperwork. That night, I revised my college list, eliminating the private universities I'd tentatively highlighted. I researched loan options until my eyes burned from the glow of my laptop screen. I applied for every obscure scholarship I could find, and I started looking for jobs near campus, places that would work around a full class schedule. By the time freshman orientation rolled around, I had 2 jobs lined up: morning shifts at a campus cafe and weekend work at a bookstore downtown. Between classes, I'd dash to the cafe, change in the bathroom, and work until my next lecture. Weekends meant 8-hour shifts among the bookshelves, followed by homework until midnight. My roommate partied. I picked up extra shifts. For years passed this way. While classmates joined clubs and went to football games, I calculated how each hour of leisure would translate to interest accruing on my loans. I graduated with honors, $80,000 in debt, and the hollow accomplishment of having done it on my own. My parents sat proudly in the audience at commencement, dabbing tears, telling relatives how independent I'd always been. 2 years later, I was steadily chipping away at my debt. Each month, I'd transfer a precisely calculated sum, enough to make progress without leaving my checking account completely barren. I had developed a 5-year plan to be debt-free by 30, which meant living with roommates, driving a car with 180,000 miles on it, and meticulously tracking every expense. This was simply my reality, and I accepted it. My brother Zach was different from me in nearly every way. Where I was cautious, he was spontaneous. Where I planned, he improvised. Throughout our childhood, these differences seemed to earn him a different set of rules. Later curfews, fewer chores, more leeway when grades slipped. But he was 3 years younger, and I chalked it up to parental evolution. They had learned to relax after their trial run with me. When Zach started looking at colleges, I offered to share my spreadsheets, my budget templates, my hard-won knowledge of financial aid forms. He thanked me but seemed oddly unconcerned. While I had applied exclusively to schools within driving distance, Zach was looking at options across the country. When I gently suggested he might want to consider the state university that had given me a partial scholarship, he shrugged. "Mom and Dad say I should go wherever I'll be happiest," he told me. I remember feeling a flicker of something then. Not quite suspicion, not quite resentment, just a momentary dissonance I couldn't articulate, but I pushed it aside. Perhaps my parents' financial situation had improved in the years since I'd left home. Perhaps they had simply realized the value of education and were willing to make greater sacrifices for Zach. Perhaps, the summer before Zach's freshman year, our parents seemed unusually involved in his college preparations. Dad took a week off work to drive him to orientation, something I had done alone by bus. Mom went on shopping sprees for his dorm supplies, new bedding, a mini fridge, a laptop to replace his aging one. When I visited home that August, The dining room table was covered with items I had carefully budgeted for or simply gone without. "Business has been good," Dad explained when he caught me staring at the pile. "And you know how your mother loves to shop." Zach enrolled at a private university with a tuition price tag that made my stomach clench. He moved into a renovated dorm with a view of the campus lake. He joined the rowing team, which practiced at dawn, meaning he couldn't work morning shifts anywhere. He took weekend trips with his new friends. And somehow, he never seemed concerned about money. It was at Thanksgiving dinner, nearly 18 months into Zach's college experience, that the foundation of my understanding began to crack. We were all seated around the dining room table, myself, Zach, our parents, and our grandparents who had driven in from Arizona. The conversation drifted to college life, and Grandpa asked Zach how he was managing his finances. "Oh, I don't have to worry about that," Zach said casually, reaching for another dinner roll. "Not like Ryan did with all his loans and stuff." The table went silent. I laughed, assuming he meant he hadn't taken out as much in loans as I had. "Yeah, well, make sure you start paying them down as soon as you graduate. That interest builds fast." Zach looked confused. He glanced at our parents, who were suddenly very interested in their plates. "What loans?" "Mom and Dad pay my tuition, and housing, and meal plan." The silence that followed had texture. I could feel it pressing against my skin as I looked from Zach to my parents. Mom's face had flushed a deep red. Dad was clearing his throat repeatedly, the way he did when uncomfortable. "Well," my father finally said, "we help where we can." Later that night, I cornered Zach in the kitchen as he raided the fridge for leftovers. "What did you mean earlier? About Mom and Dad paying for everything?" He looked genuinely perplexed. "Exactly that. They deposit money for tuition each semester, plus extra for books and stuff. They didn't do that for you?" I felt as though I was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring down into darkness. "No," I said carefully. "They told me they couldn't afford to help me. That's why I have all the student debt." Zach's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization, then to discomfort. "Oh, I just assumed." He trailed off, looking past me to where our mother had appeared in the doorway. "Ryan," she began, her voice tight, "it's complicated." The conversation that followed in the living room unmade everything I thought I knew about my place in our family. My father spoke of different circumstances and how they'd been in a better position financially when Zach started school. My mother suggested that they'd wanted to teach me responsibility because I was more naturally disciplined than my brother. But as they talked, other truths emerged through the gaps in their explanations. How they'd started a college fund for Zach when he was born, but not for me. How they'd worried Zach wouldn't apply himself without their support, whereas I had always been so driven. How they'd decided I would value my education more if I paid for it myself. "We thought we were doing the right thing," my father insisted. "You've always been the strong one, Ryan." I left their house that night with the cold November air burning my lungs and my hands shaking as I gripped my steering wheel. The story of my life was being rewritten in my mind, not as the natural consequences of financial necessity, but as a deliberate choice my parents had made. A choice that favored my brother. In the weeks that followed, memories resurfaced with new context. The school trip to Washington, D.C. that I couldn't attend because we couldn't afford it. The same year they bought Zach a new gaming system for Christmas. The driving lessons I paid for with summer job money while Zach was gifted Dad's patient instruction. The months after graduation when I ate ramen in a shared apartment because they couldn't help with rent. While Zach was given a stipend during his unpaid internship, I began pulling away. I made excuses to miss Sunday dinners. I let calls go to voicemail. I shortened my visits home. My parents noticed, how could they not? But seemed unsure how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. Zach tried to mediate, suggesting my parents could help pay some of my loans now. But the suggestion only underscored the years I'd already spent struggling unnecessarily. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the lie. The persistent, years-long deception that had shaped every decision I'd made, every opportunity I'd passed up, Every night I'd lain awake worrying about finances while my brother slept peacefully, unencumbered. 6 months after Thanksgiving, I finally agreed to meet my parents for dinner at a neutral location, a restaurant downtown where the ambient noise would discourage raised voices. I had spent those months in weekly therapy sessions, trying to process the anger and betrayal that threatened to consume me. My therapist had encouraged me to establish boundaries, to express my feelings without expectation, to recognize that I might never receive the apology I deserved. "We miss you," my mother said as soon as we were seated. "We feel like we've lost you." "I needed space," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I needed to figure out how to move forward knowing what I know now." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Ryan, we hope you understand that we always acted with your best interests at heart. We knew you could handle the responsibility." "Zach." Well, Zach needed more support. I set down my water glass carefully. "I want to be clear about something. I'm not angry that you helped Zach through college. I'm hurt that you lied to me about being able to help me. I made life-altering decisions based on what you told me. Taking those loans, working those jobs instead of doing internships that could have advanced my career, choosing a school based on cost rather than opportunity. You didn't give me a choice." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We're sorry you feel that way," she said, which wasn't an apology at all. "We always knew you would succeed," my father added. "And look at you now, you're doing so well." I realized then that they would never truly understand what they had done. In their narrative, they had made a parenting choice that turned out fine because I had managed to succeed despite it. The inequity, the deception, the breach of trust, these were footnotes in their version of our family story, not the central theme they had become in mine. That dinner marked a turning point, though not the one my parents had hoped for. I stopped trying to make them understand. I stopped waiting for a genuine apology or acknowledgement. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life around a new understanding of family, one where love doesn't have to mean unconditional trust, where I could set boundaries without guilt, where I could choose what role they would play in my future. I'm still paying off the debt, but at least now I know the real cost wasn't financial. It was trust, and I'll never take that for granted again. The lessons I've learned weren't the ones my parents intended to teach, but they've shaped me nonetheless. I've learned to question narratives, to verify truths, to understand that sometimes the people who should protect you the most can justify hurting you in the name of what they think is best. Most importantly, I've learned that my worth isn't determined by how others, even my parents, value me. Some days that knowledge feels like freedom. Other days it feels like loss. But it's always, unfailingly, the truth. And after years of living with lies, I'll take the hardest truth over the most comforting deception every time.